Okay, let's see if this works. Hello, everybody. Hello, I am Josephine Snowling and welcome to my channel. Today, I want to talk about how to make a decision that is in alignment with your soul. If any of you are jumping on live now, please let me know in the comments, in the chat box, whether you can hear this. I have had some serious audio issues coming up this morning, but hopefully they are sorted now. So how do we make decisions that feel good for our soul? That is the topic of conversation today. And what I want to talk about first is this idea of pendulum swinging. And this is why we end up not making decisions that are in alignment with our soul. And so what happens is when we get into this pendulum swinging state is we end up being in a life experience that we don't enjoy, that doesn't fulfill us, that doesn't light us up. And what happens is we experience that negative emotion, that strong contrast. And what this can cause us to do if we are not careful and we're not conscious about it is it can cause us to sit in this one place here in this life experience where we're feeling negative emotion, we're feeling strong contrast. And we get to that point where we're like, it's one of those like fuck it moments. It's like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want this. Like something has to change. And there's a lot of energy and a lot of momentum behind that. So we sit in this place here. And then if we aren't conscious and if we're not in a place where we're making decisions that feel good for our soul, what can happen is we pendulum swing from one extreme to the other in an attempt, in a logical attempt to move ourselves away from that negative situation and into something that we feel is good. Because when we get into that state where we're not making decisions, where we're not living our life that feels good to our souls, that is when our soul kind of feels suffocated. And so what we're actually doing, like I said, it's quite logical. We're moving from one place in the opposite direction, the complete opposite direction a lot of the time, in this attempt to release that suffocation on our soul. But what can happen quite a lot of the time is when we do that, we end up running away from situations. We end up chasing experiences to try to feel good, to try to align with our soul, rather than sitting in this empowered place to attract it. And so this is what I want to talk about, because I think it's something that a lot of us do, and we do it unknowingly. And this is why we end up moving from one experience to the other, one negative life experience to the other, and never really feeling fulfilled, never really feeling like we're able to get closer to what it is that we truly desire, to what it is that really lights our soul up. And I think that one of the big problems is because we are doing this pendulum swinging motion where we just hop from one extreme to the other. And the other thing that happens when we do that, again, when we're not conscious, is we end up, so not only do we move from one extreme to the other in like a physical sense in our reality, but we also take our mindset and our beliefs with us. So let me give you an example from my own experience to try and get this in your head and to see whether you can relate to this, whether you've experienced something similar in your life. So 6 years ago, or nearly 6 years ago now, I became a mum, and it was a bit of a tipping point for me. It was my pendulum swinging moment, if you want to call it that. So prior to the birth of my first daughter, I kind of fell into a corporate job. I was in that like early stage of life. I didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to make some money, and I was living for the weekend, all that kind of stuff. So I fell into this corporate role. I was good at it, which is another it's not a bad sign, but it makes it harder when you're good at something, because you can be equally good at something, but it completely not light you up at all. So I fell into this job. I became a business analyst, And I got stuck in that job basically for 5 years. I decided I was going to climb the corporate ladder because I was making good money from it. But I knew deep down in my soul that it wasn't for me. It was not something that was lighting me up. But I kind of stuck with it because I didn't really know what else to do. And it just seemed like the thing that I should do. But the years kind of crept by, and the resentment started to grow, the frustration started to grow, and the exhaustion from living out something that was not fulfilling me day in, day out. And it kind of got to this point. So I fell pregnant with my first daughter 5 years ago. And that was like my moment of saying, okay, I'm about to have a child now. And yeah, what am I doing with my life? Like, I don't enjoy this job. This job is not fulfilling me. It is not lighting me up in any way. And I got to one of those kind of bucket moments, one of those, right, this is it, you know, something's got to happen, something's got to change. And I was lucky enough to have a really good maternity leave option with the company that I was working for. And so I took a year out and I just dived straight in to being a mum, which I absolutely enjoyed. And I don't look back and regret it at all. But when I really look back at that situation, I used that opportunity to become a stay-at-home mum, and that was my final decision. Was I wasn't going to return to work. I wanted to be available and present, and I wanted to be the main caregiver for my daughter. So I decided to become a stay-at-home mum and leave my corporate job for good. I wasn't just on maternity leave anymore. I'd left it, and it felt like it was the right decision to make. It felt like it was in alignment. But really, when I look back on it, what I was doing was I was running away from all of the things that I did not like about being in a corporate job, and kind of using that opportunity to become a stay-at-home mum as my get out clause. Now, I'm not saying anything about being a stay-at-home mum at all. This was just my personal situation, because what I actually realized as I started to go on further into being a stay-at-home mum is all of those same feelings that I started to feel in my corporate job started to come back again. There was feelings of frustration and irritation and kind of confusion, really. And I started to question, what on earth is going on? I thought that I left this one situation, this one circumstance, to move into something that was more in alignment with me. And thankfully, I was in a position where I was far more conscious this time. I was more aware of my own mental dialogue that was happening in my head. And this was when I kind of realized this was like a pendulum swinging moment. So I had gone from like being in my corporate job that I did not enjoy, and I swung completely the opposite to being a stay-at-home mum. And if I wasn't careful, I was in danger of then being in that stay-at-home mum role. And obviously I wasn't going to swing back to my corporate job, because life experience had taught me that wasn't something I enjoyed. That kind of work environment was not something that was particularly thrilling for me. But I was in danger of moving from this place and kind of going off in the opposite direction, but over here. But what stopped me was being able to pause in that moment of, this is it. I can't do it. I've had enough. I can't, this is not fulfilling me. To just pause and take a moment and to ground and say, okay, what is it that really isn't working here? Is it everything, or is it just a few things? And this is why we end up constantly in that place of not feeling fulfilled, because we take too big a jump. It takes a hell of a lot of energy and courage to do those huge jumps in life. And I'm not saying sometimes they are like completely needed. And sometimes the complete opposite is what you want. But I want to challenge your mindset in this video today to question whether it's not always everything about your situation that needs to change. It might just be a few small things that need to be tweaked in order for you to get more in alignment with what feels good for your soul. So I was able to recognize that what it was that I did want to work. I did want to have something that was for me, that tapped into a different part of me that motherhood didn't allow me to. But I didn't want to completely walk away from that motherhood role. I didn't want to, be out of the house 5 days a week, 9 till 5. I wanted to be able to still be a very prominent caregiver in my child's life. And I went on to have the second child as well, which really reiterated the feelings. And so I was able to say, okay, what is it that I love about this situation? Because what tends to happen as well, when we get to that point where we're having one of those moments where it's like, I can't do this anymore, like this is enough, this is not what I want, is that we end up, our focus is so heavily placed on all of the things that we don't enjoy, all of the things that is burning us out, that is literally suffocating our soul, that we forget about the things that are actually quite good about the circumstance that we're in, the life situation that we're in. And so you can start to see why we end up always missing that kind of thing that our soul is in alignment with, the thing that we want, the thing that is going to light us up. And this can be applied to any life situation. This can be a job, this can be money, this can be relationships, this can be living in different locations around the world, literally anything. And look, sometimes, having those swings where we go from one extreme to the other, like, it gives us life experience. It gives us information to gain more clarity on what it is that we do want. But it can be exhausting to live like that, because you're in that state where you're just constantly chasing all of the time, rather than standing in this like empowered place and attracting what it is that you want and consciously creating your life. So what can we do about it? Now, I've come up with some of the things that I have done in my own life experience that have really helped me when I've had those moments of really strong contrast, when I've had to make what has felt like a very important life decision, and how I've been able to make those decisions and move into a place that is more in alignment with my soul. So the first thing that I always say is you need to become conscious. Now, if you've watched this video, you will already have started that process of becoming more conscious about this pendulum effect that can happen in life, that is caused because of experiencing contrast. And also as well, it doesn't have to be really extreme contrast. Like, it doesn't have to be really traumatic experiences that can cause this. It can be just, like I said, with like a career example, it can just be staying in a job that hasn't fulfilled you for years and years. And it's like, what's happened is it's almost built up to become quite a traumatic realization. So one of the things that we can do is we can start to become conscious. And what I want you to really look out for is, so first of all, let's talk about the big warning sign. And then let's talk about how to look at it before we get to that big warning sign. So the big warning sign is when you have one of those breakdown moments of saying, okay, this is it. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this. I'm fed up. I'm frustrated. You know the feeling. I'm sure we have all experienced those moments. And it's one of those moments as well where you kind of feel that energy within you and you're like, something needs to change. Something needs to happen. And then what happens is when you get into that energy, you feel very action orientated. Now, this isn't a bad thing, but what you want to start becoming aware of is that when you act from that place, you are acting from a place where you're being very emotionally driven by low vibrations, rather than making decisions when you're in a higher vibration, when you're in a place of calm, and you're able to really follow those internal cues rather than just like, right, this is it, I'm going to do this. Like there is definitely a benefit to that. But what I want you to do is when you feel one of those moments, have that moment, completely embrace it, completely go for it. But then I want you to pause. I want you to get into this habit of pausing. So kind of, I don't want to call it a tantrum because like, there's some good motivational energy behind that, but like get that all out and then pause. Don't go and start making any extreme decisions. Don't start making any taking any actions. Just come and pause. And then what you want to do is you then want to start getting yourself, this is where the internal work then comes in. You want to start getting into a place where you're then able to get into a higher vibration. You can release the resistance because you're holding on to a lot of resistance right now with all of, how you're feeling about that life circumstance. So there's a lot of resistance there. You're in a low vibration. It's normally anger, which anger can be quite a good thing because there's a lot of energy behind anger. But again, we don't want to be making those decisions from that place of anger. So use that anger energy to kind of propel you into, because this is what happens. You kind of get propelled up into courage, which is great. Courage is a high vibration. If you look at the vibrational scale, it's like anger, then courage. And then once you tip over, you're then into those higher vibrations. But what can happen is you can have the courage, but you haven't really got them. You're not acting from a conscious place of courage, so to speak. So this is where you want to start asking those internal questions. So my recommendation is sit and meditate. Get out your cushion, sit on your bed, on your chair, whatever it is, wherever you're comfortable, and see if you can go into a meditative state. You want to start clearing your mind. You want to start turning down the internal noise that is coming from this life experience and your mind just going crazy with it. I would recommend, instead of just sitting down, I mean, this is obviously personal preference, but I would recommend sitting down and meditating to something that's guided rather than just turning on white noise or even just silence. Now, obviously, like I say, this is personal preference, but the reason that I recommend using a guided meditation is because this helps to take your focus off of all of those thoughts that are going on in your head. If you're listening to somebody else's voice and somebody is guiding you to think about specific things, to visualize specific things, it just helps to take that focus off of the circumstance, the situation that is causing all of that brain fog to occur. So one of my favorite go-to meditation sites is actually a YouTube channel called Rising Higher Meditation. And all the meditations are guided by an amazing woman called Jess Shepherd. So I will add, I think I've added it. There's a link in the description below for this video. I'm not affiliated in any way, but her meditations are ones that I have used a lot. And they really suit my style, but obviously you have to find your own style of what works for you. So get into that calmer space with it all. Take the energy of something needs to change, something needs to happen. I recognize that this is not fulfilling me anymore and I need to search for what is, but just pause before you take the action on what it is that's going to then get you into more alignment. Okay. And another thing that we want to start doing, as I was saying, is get into those higher vibrations. And the reason we want to do that and we want to start lowering resistance is because that is when the intuition starts to come through. That is when those little nuggets of information, that kind of gold comes through to us. And then we can start acting on inspired action, which is in alignment with our inner self. Like those little breadcrumb thoughts that we get are coming from a higher place. They are coming from your inner being, your higher self, your soul, whatever it is that you like to call it. The part of you that is residing in non-physical, that can see the bigger perspective. It knows exactly what you want and it knows how to get you there. And that is the person we want to be tapping into. That is the part of you want to be tapping into, because it is their voice. Sorry, excuse me. I've had a bit of a cold recently and I've got a bit of a tickle, so I need to keep sipping on my ginger tea. Okay, so that's the person that we want to be engaging with at this point. Now, I know this can be quite difficult, because if you're in a place of frustration and irritation and anger, for me to then turn around and say, just get into a high vibration, is probably going to irritate you even more. But you don't have to get into a high vibration for days on end. I'm not saying let's go and walk around in the clouds. It's about getting yourself into that high vibration for 10, 15, 20 minutes, just to start allowing that inner voice to come through, so you can start getting clarity on the situation. So whatever methods you use to normally try and raise your vibration, it might be a gratitude practice, it might be, like I say, meditation, it might be even just going out for a walk, just clearing your hair, getting out of that headspace that you're in. That is what you're trying to achieve. And then another good way that what you then want to start doing is you want to start probing yourself for what that decision is going to be, for what the next steps are. So what I like to do is, this is like a little journal prompt, is to ask yourself, what would you do if you had no limitations? If you had no money restrictions, you had no time restrictions, you had no geographical restrictions, no family restrictions, nothing. What would you do? What would you allow yourself to do? Now, this just starts to give you a bit more of an insight into what it is that you want. Okay, because this is what we're not trying to run away from the situation. We are trying to align ourselves with a life circumstance that feels good to our soul. That's what we're trying to do. And so that is a really good place to start journaling. Okay, so anytime, and if you start writing and thoughts start coming out and you start getting those limiting beliefs come up, just try and see if you can put them aside, recognize them, and just remove them from your journaling process. Go back to, if I had no restrictions. When me and my husband, when we decided to relocate our family across the other side of the country, excuse me, this was the exact process I went through. So we landed on moving from one side of England over to Wales. And we were moving to send my daughter to a completely new school. It was like I can't think of the word. It's like an alternative style of education. And I was really umming and ahhing whether this was the right thing for us to do. And one of the things that really made me feel empowered about the decision I was making was because I asked this question. I said to myself, are we moving because of money restrictions? Are we moving because of location? Excuse me, sorry. What is it like that we are moving for? And if I had none of those restrictions, would I still pick this option? And the answer every time came back as yes. If I said, if I had all the money in the world in my bank account, or even if you say, like, I've got 10 million pounds in my bank account right now, I have no job, I have all the time in the world, those kinds of things, would I still make this decision? And this is how, as well, if you end up going down that road of trying to jump a bit too early into action and making a decision whilst you're in that kind of heightened state, These are really good questions to just check yourself as to whether you are really making a soul-led decision or whether you're kind of running and chasing something that you believe is going to be better. So that's another really good journaling prompt to get into. And so this is how we can get into a place where we make a soul-led decision. But what we also want to do is we want to start working on not getting to that point where we have one of those bucket moments where we're like, that's enough, I can't do this anymore. Because really, if we're truthful and honest with ourselves, those little indications that something wasn't right, that something wasn't in alignment, happened much earlier than when you got to the point of, I can't do this anymore. And it's all just a learning experience. And it's learning to trust that inner voice, you know, rather than waiting until it's a loud, deafening shout in our ears. We need to start learning to become conscious of it and start acting upon it when that voice is quiet, you know, because that's why the years roll by before we make a decision, because we wait until it is so agonizing to remain in the circumstance that we're currently in that we have to move, rather than going when it's easy, going when it's, you know, when it's going with the flow, when there's not all these things riding on it, when it's just like, oh, let's just give it a try, you know, like there's no pressure. Whereas when you get to that point where it's like you can't stand it any longer, that's when you end up rushing it, because you're then so desperate, you know, you're so fed up of being in this, feeling this way and being in this life situation, that you end up trying to rush to the next thing rather than just taking that pause, which I know can be very hard, because when that momentum has built up, you don't want to pause, you just want to jump, you're fed up with it at this point. But if you don't want to keep jumping from place to place and not feeling satisfied, then the pause is what is really necessary. So this is where we have to start becoming conscious of that little internal voice earlier on. And you can still do all of these exercises that I've just gone through, even when that little voice is quiet. And oh, I forgot one exercise. Another exercise that you can do, again, when you've got to like an extreme point, as well as when that little voice is talking. And this is actually one of the most useful ones, so I'm really sorry if I nearly missed that, is to look at the circumstance, look at the situation that you're wanting to move away from. And again, get into this like neutral place with it. Make sure you're not in this really like charged energy of it. And ask yourself, what are the bits that I like? You can start off, if it makes it easier, to write down all the bits that you don't like. But make sure that you look for the things that you do actually enjoy. Like when I look back to when I left my corporate job, because I was so focused on all of the things that I did not enjoy, that became my picture, that became my story. And I sort of forgot about those bits that I did actually quite enjoy about it. You know, when I was in a corporate setting, I was a manager. And so I really enjoyed teaching people and empowering people and supporting people. It was just on the wrong subject. But it was still something that I enjoyed. It was something that I didn't want to move away from that aspect of it. And it's the same with the situation that I'm in now, deciding to incorporate more of being an entrepreneur into my life, as well as being a mother. You know, there is a lot of things that I enjoy about just being a stay-at-home mum that I don't want to get rid of. And this is the thing, quite often we think that when we're in a situation that we don't enjoy, that's not fulfilling, that's not lighting us up, that we feel like that we're a million miles away from where we actually want to be. Whereas in reality, if we were to just come into this more neutral place and really look at what it is that we like and don't like about our life situation, I'm pretty sure most of us would find that we're not actually too far from where we really want to be. But when we get into this heavy place of contrast, it causes us to like ping pong ourselves about all over the place And this is why it feels like we are always so far away from what it is that feels good for our soul. When in reality, we're actually much closer than what we allow ourselves to believe. So it is so important to look for what is it that you enjoy right now about this situation. And so let's take a job, for example. So it might be that, you really like the job that you do. You like the type of career, but the company is just not, you just don't fit with their vibe. Or it might be that you really like the company and you like the opportunities that are there, but it's just this role is not fitting you. So it can be that actually it's not about having to make those extreme changes of changing careers completely or leaving a company or whatever it might be for each different circumstance. It might just be tweaking things to bring yourself more into alignment. You have to remember that at the end of the day, you do have this soul, this inner being, this higher self that is always every single second of the day looking out for you. It knows what you want and it knows where you are in relation to it, and it is not desperately, but it is always trying to move you into the direction of what it is that you want. And so sometimes we get those little intuition nudges that come through that we just follow without really being conscious of it. They're always being channeled to us, and sometimes we follow them unconsciously and sometimes we follow them consciously, and we know, yes, that was an internal nudge that I should be following. So this is why in reality we're not always as far away from where we want to be as what we think we are. And what can be damaging is when we think that we are so far away from what it is that our soul really wants, and we start taking action from a place of very charged emotion that ends up taking us further away. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I hope that this has given you a really juicy insight into something that I think every single one of us goes through. So let me know in the comments, let me know in the chat if this is something that if you've experienced it. Let me know if are you in one of those moments right now where you're like, oh, this is it, I need to make a change. You're on that cusp of taking that action. And are you going to, after watching this video, take that moment to pause and to just dig a bit deeper before you then decide to take that action? Let's start getting into a place where we take inspired action rather than just action for action's sake. Action is great. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel alive. But let's start taking inspired action rather than just action because we want to run away from something, action because we feel like we should be chasing something, or action because we feel like we should be doing something. Mental inner work is far more beneficial, far more powerful than just handing in your notice or handing your partner the divorce papers, So let me know, are you in this situation? And hopefully you've been able to hear this live, because I went on earlier. So I was supposed to go on at 11 today, which I did, but none of the audio recorded, which was just painful because there was some stuff I know that came out in that session that probably hasn't made it to this one because it's all kind of being channeled, but it's all perfect. What needs to come out is what needs to come out, and it will be attracted to whoever wants to hear it. So I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed this video, then I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up, give it a like, so that I can get it out to more people who need to hear it. And if you're new here, then feel free to follow me at Josephine Snowling, my YouTube channel, where I talk about empowerment, expansion, love, consciousness, all of those good things, all things about life and how to consciously create the life that you desire. No chasing, just attracting. So have a beautiful day, whatever it is you're doing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.